and we're moving into our second segment for today as we continue our conversation. We had a little flashback earlier with an interview from 2011 with the father of the nation, George Price. And now we're going to have a conversation with Saidy Godette, who is the curator and coordinator of the George Price Center in Belmopan. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you.
And we were able to steal you away a day before National Service Day, which is an important day in the legacy of Mr. Price.
Yes.
So let's just start talking about the George Price Center itself and what it offers to Belizeans.
Right. So the center, to go back a little, the center opened its doors in 2004. The building itself was dedicated in 2003, 2009, again, nonprofit status. So essentially, the center is geared towards peace and development. And it's not necessarily only, it's located in Belmopan, but it is not peace and development of Belmopan as a whole, but it's essentially peace and development of Belize. It focuses on community service. It's a non-profit, but we do have rentals within the facility, the conference rooms, etc. We cater mainly towards workshops, things that are centered around peace and development, nonviolence, launching of books, etc. The center is also a small museum. We have a number of the pieces of Mr. Price. We have his famous round table where they said the decision was made for the peaceful, constructive Belizean revolution. We have his typewriter. We have an archival room. Thanks to the help of the National Archives and with the assistance of the University of Belize history students and other students, they were able to catalog and have a number of his original typewritten speeches, his any thank you letter, any thank you cards, we have it there in the center. Yeah. So we have a lot of history.
You can even hear some of the recordings.
And you can hear some of the recordings. We have a number of the videos, etc. So the center, the archives and the museums are strong, but it's small for a reason. Mr. Price was not a materialistic man. He, even in, there's a video that we have, and I give it to your producers. There's a video, and he was convinced only to have a fridge. That's the only thing he could have been convinced to have, a very small fridge that we have in the museum and still works. So it's a really good brand. But that was it. That was the most electrical, that's the most modern piece that we have in the museum. Everything else is very simple, and it kind of tells you what kind of man he was. Right, so that's what we do at the center. We are a two-person facility. We have it's me and Mr. Bala Ramos, who is also there.
What's the general flow of people?
All right. So on an annual basis, we see somewhere about 30,000 people. Why I say 30,000? They come back. We have a lot of foreigners, or we call comebackies, who come back to Belize and want to go back in time, and they remember the contributions that Mr. Price made. And the majority of our visitors are school children, which is good for us, because his legacy is something that is well known to the older persons, to a certain generation, but to the younger generation, there's a disconnect. And my job is to make that connection.
What interests them the most when you do your
What
tour?
interests them? The typewriter.
They don't know what a typewriter is.
They've never seen it. They know what a cell phone is. They know what a computer is. But to see a type, what is that? How does it work? But I find the most interesting part about those school visits is the fact that, especially from areas like Corazal and Toledo, they bring their grandparents. And you see the awe when the grandparents walk into the center and say, I remember him. I had a conversation with him. And you kind of see the fact that he was a humble leader. And because every school visit that we had that brought a parent or a grandparent had a conversation with Mr. Price. And that's very rare for a politician.
I was, when I saw it there, I was happy because I had the personal experience of sitting with him many times. I was introduced to him by Anthony Sylvester and Mr. Winston Smiling.
Right.
And he is somebody that always remembered your name. He's very, he had this connection. So you are the son of,
Yeah.
he would reference you. But I remember in our conversations, he was always asking me, Kevin, you know, what are young people thinking? You know, he was always looking to the future. And so my question to you is, what in terms of the development aspect of the George Price Center, where is it going next to encompass that part of his spirit, which was not thinking about now, he was always thinking of where do I conquer next?
And that's a distinction between a good manager and a leader, to think beyond and to long term.
Yeah.
What we're doing to go beyond now, I'm examining and developing a literacy program, bringing it back. Why I'm doing that, and this is early literacy. Literacy 1 is development index, and it tells you how far you are along the development process. 2, there are a lot of children. If you walk out in Belmopan during summer especially, there are a lot of them all over the place, and you ask them a question, they can answer you, but ask them to read, and then you realize that there needs to be some kind of assistance. And we don't want to charge them. We just are aiming towards developing their literacy skills, because it starts with that. It starts with that discipline of reading a book, and eventually it moves into the discipline of attaining some kind of higher education eventually. So that's where we're going in terms of that. Skills, as it pertains to skills, we aim at promoting any kind of extracurricular activities that promotes some kind of strategic thinking. One of them would be chess. And we have the National Chess Association in Belmopan. Mr. Akeem Jenkins, he has his chess program every other week at the center, and we have him here. And we encourage people to come in, and we encourage them to learn that skill, because some may think that chess is just something on the board and you just move the pieces, but it requires strategic thinking, to think beyond what you're doing or what the opponent is doing, to think 10 moves ahead of your opponent. So, you know, we're trying to promote that as well, and we're having fencing.
Yeah.
And fencing is, I mean, not a lot of people you hear have fencing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
saw, yeah.
There's a club in Belize.
Again,
Yeah.
strategic thinking.
Yeah.
Right? So we have things like that it promotes sort of like team building, and it promotes a sense of family within the center, because when you make those connections with the children, they come back to you eventually. They keep coming back, and they're the ones that are going to replace us eventually anyways.
Yeah.
So you have a child that I just taught to read, or Michael just taught to fence, and he had a connection with the center, he will come back, and he can give that time again. So it's a cycle, just like poverty. We can reverse that with something more developmental.
Now, Saidy, I was telling you that we had aired a portion of an interview we did with Mr. Price himself. And the closing clip, I'm still thinking of it, because he spoke of we must remain servants to the people as leaders. And Service Day is tomorrow. His legacy was transformed into a day where people are asked to go out and do acts of community for our country. How, you know, being so involved in his own history and his own evolution as a leader and the greatest leader in the country, how much do you feel that it fits the purpose as to what he spent his life doing?
Now, and funny that you brought up that service quote that he says. There's a quote that's next to me every day when I work.
Wow.
I believe service should start with your others rather than yourself, and that's something that he said to the Miami Herald when he did that interview there. And if every time when I was hired to do this job, I went in bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, thinking about what it meant to be a coordinator for something, for a person like him. He is the father of the nation. Yeah. And it's a extremely big seat or position to fill. But, sorry, I think that it pushes me every day to go beyond what people think and people feel that George Price is supposed to be. Is there
Yeah, we're
water?
gonna get it. Yeah. So we're.
All right, so a leader for George Price, as somebody who is a leader, I think that. Sorry.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting. If I could cut you there. Sorry.
Yeah.
It's interesting that Mr. Price has really transcended a lot of the limitations we have in Belize in terms of, just to switch it a little. Belize is a very difficult place to be in terms of being able to identify complementarily people who are doing well. And Mr. Price has transcended all political lines. He's transcended all ethical lines. He's transcended timelessness, time. And, you know, I'm wondering, my question to you is, this year, when we're about to stare down a referendum which goes to our very identity, what of Mr. Price's legacy and of his spirit can we draw from to move our nation past this hurdle? That was something that he actually built up the greatest defense against, because he took us into independence.
Yeah. Okay, so his philosophy was peaceful, constructive Belizean revolution.
Yeah.
And it remained peaceful and constructive because it's your history. I don't know why I'm joking.
Yeah.
Your history is a unique one, meaning you gained independence very late.
Yes.
You're rather young in your independence. But you did it because Mr. Price foresaw that if you gained independence in 64, you would be in trouble, more than likely. You were challenged, right, by somebody else outside. Even in his independence speech, he said that he is welcoming the international bodies. He's welcoming cooperation with the United Kingdom because he wants our boundaries to be secure, our territory, right? And I think with this referendum that's happening right now, what you should take away from what he did is, one, the peaceful and constructive Belizean revolution. Maintain that peaceful negotiation. Aim for peace. Why? Think about your size. Think about your strength right now, right? Also, I think what you should take away from what Mr. Price did was that he went out to every international body that he could find and had a discussion with them. A very logical, tactical discussion as to what Belize could do for the international community, what the international community could do for us. Reciprocal altruism and negotiation is the road that you should take. And I think that you should not go down the aggressive route, the offensive route. Why? Because in history, any nation that went down that route, it costs lives, it costs money, it costs a reverse in your whatever you would have developed right now. So I think that is what you should aim for.
You know, when you speak of what we call the internationalization of the Belize issue, it's interesting when we reflect on the path to independence, because what a lot of people don't know, don't remember, is that he was really, there were a lot of people who thought that we were not ready for independence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There were a lot of people who thought that, you know, Belize, becoming Belize on what would be the 21st end of this week, 37 years later, that we were jeopardizing ourselves and putting ourselves at risk. And there were protests, and, you know, it was seen as something very detrimental in our own progression as a country.
Again, that is what separates a leader from everybody else.
Yeah.
The ability to not go align yourself to the status quo and to move beyond what you feel should be the vision, the mission, the goal for your country, the future for your country. And in any history of any leader, any great leader, there's always opposition.
Yeah.
To be a leader means that you will have
Of course.
extensive opposition.
Yeah.
For sure.
Right? You will have extensive opposition. But what Mr. Price said is that politics is not a carnival, right? It's not a crusade, it's penance. Right? To be a politician is penance. And why he made that connection, because he was also one of the very few leaders that could merge religion and politics together.
Yeah.
Again in
Seamlessly.
history, yes, again in history, very few leaders could do that. They seem to have done it, but as Machiavelli said, they were the fox in the background, right? They did not merge it, but Mr. Price merged it. Right? He merged it in the time 1981. He attained independence, but he spent those years from 64 to 81, and before that, he trained to be a priest. He did not complete that training before he went towards politics.
Yeah.
But he kept the idea and the principles of that training.
Yeah.
He kept the principle of that training. Devote yourself and to serve your country, almost marrying your country,
Yeah.
right? Queen Elizabeth, almost marrying your country completely, and give that service to your people. And Belize at the time, I think in 1981, you had about 149,000 people. He was able to touch almost all of those people. He was able to go to every district, and he never liked to say outer district. He liked to say Belizean. He wanted to ensure that when he left this world, that Belizeans would consider themselves Belizean and not anybody outside of Belize City or Belmopan. We're outer district people. No, you're Belizean. And the pictures that we have in the museum, we have him speaking to children. We have him speaking to farmers. We have him speaking to businessmen, to leaders, to international leaders. And
He was known to connect with all
he
people.
had this distinctive ability.
Yeah.
Even though personally, I believed he was simple and quiet, but when put in the position where he had to represent his country, he exemplified what a humble person was supposed to be, and his humility helped people to connect to him.
You know, you keep on talking about the difference between leadership
Yep.
and I forget the
Management,
other
managers.
but you know, one of the things that to me, I look at it, his relevance for Mr. Price is what Belize should be. His spirit is, and one of the things that he teaches our leaders is, and I think this would change a lot for who we are as a people, is he teaches us that we're one community. I'll never forget the stories of him telling his driver to stop and pick up random Belizeans on the side of the road, and he would have conversations with them. Now we have our big wig managers, politicians, driving up the road in their government, in their tax-paid SUVs with the windows rolled up, not even looking to the side. But he also taught us in terms of community. Who are you? Who's your mother? Where did you come from? You know, and to let us have that connection. And I think that level of connection is something important before we go forward. I have a face the question though, putting you on the spot. What do you think Mr. Price would be doing now if he was here when we are about to face the referendum? Do you think he would be campaigning? Do you think he would be campaigning for a yes and no? What would he be doing right now if you were to guess? Would he be voting yes or no?
I won't answer that one. I won't answer. I won't be. I won't answer yes or no. It's a heavy question. But what I think Mr. Price would be doing is what Mr. Price would have always be doing. He would have been going out there and asking the people what they think, what they should do, what they think he should do. I think that is the distinction. Many times, and you said yes, politicians, you see them mostly when they're campaigning.
Yeah,
that's
only.
when you get to know them.
Only.
But I think Mr. Price at this point, and this would be such a technological shock for him to be alive in this period. I think Mr. Price at this point would be making more of a connection with the people and asking them what their opinions were and going around. And if he were campaigning, he would be campaigning in terms of making speeches out there, speaking to the people, having public forums all of the time. I think that was his style.
Yeah.
So for him to be alive now, to be a politician now, it would be one, difficult, very difficult, but two,
people don't change. It would be difficult.
People don't change.
He'd be king now.
He would be just the same as he is, and he would be even more so loved because he would be unique.
Yes.
Yeah.
He would be unique because, and at times somebody asked me a question. Yours was heavy, but somebody asked me, could there be another George Price, a politician like a politician like George Price? And I said that's a difficult one because
I've been a couple similar though.
he was a man that was successful within his time, and like I said, because of his unique background and his religious background, it made him into the politician that he was. He was a priest politician, you know. He
priest
merged the priesthood with, you know, politics. But to have a politician now with social media now running politics, you would never see George Price on Twitter.
No.
Yeah.
Hell no.
No. And the context has changed.
The
access
context
to
and
information
your
has
population
changed. Yeah.
size has changed.
Yeah.
Yeah, people are now identifying more with politicians who don't want ratings and who go out there and build a building and say that this is you know this is my contribution. But no, I think the connection with George Price and the people would probably be conversation rather than campaigning.
Well, I think our very own Prime Minister has answered that question for you already when he delivered the speech and said there's never been and never will be a leader as great as George Price. And I say that quote and I think to myself, one of the things that we don't do enough in this country is celebrate our own people. And we will use quotes from all over the world with people's names we can't even pronounce and books we've never read. And George Price himself has said some very memorable things. From all that you've heard, the speeches, the books, the notes, what's the most memorable quote from him that you wish every Belizean would walk around with and believe and use?
Nation building is a task of giants.
Ah, that was mine. That was mine. Wow, that was mine.
And
Why?
why?
Yeah.
When you think giant, you are thinking physically giants. But when I think giants, I am thinking of a person's personality and their charisma and their contribution. And nation building is indeed a task of giants, plural. It cannot be done alone.
Yeah.
George Price, yes, indeed, he's the father of the nation. He has a legacy. But he did not do it alone. He did it with the assistance of people who followed him. And again, I'm going to go back to leaders. Leaders have followers. Managers have subordinates.
Yeah.
Right? Politicians now have subordinates, people below them. He had followers that would go with him to the end of every end of Belize. So nation building is a task of giants.
And I think that's a perfect way to close off this segment. You know, we'll give people homework even though we're not teachers, but maybe we should all do that. Research our own favorite quote
And
from
next
George
year
Price.
is his 100th, and we'll be celebrating that.
All right.
Yep.
Thank you for coming in, Saidy. Once again, you can always visit the George Price Center in Belmopan and be able to see the pictures, the items from his home, listen to some of his speeches. He was a great orator as well when you hear him delivering his speeches and get to share in the history of his life, the legacy of the father of our nation. Thank you once again.
You're
We're going to
welcome.
go ahead and take a break. When we come back, we'll be talking about the annual coastal and river cleanup, so stay tuned.